A perfect home on a snowy Christmas night hides a secret so dark, it would silence an entire town forever. The night was silent in Boulder, Colorado. Snow fell in soft sheets, wrapping the Ramsey house in a pale, dreamlike stillness. Inside, the glow of Christmas lights flickered faintly through frosted windows. The house smelled of pine and cold air, of cinnamon from the cookies left half eaten on the counter. It was supposed to be a peaceful night, filled with laughter and the soft hum of holiday joy. But beneath that warmth, something unseen stirred. A hallway light buzzed faintly, the bulb trembling against the winter air seeping in through the cracks. The old wooden staircase creaked, a small sound, swallowed by the heavy silence of the house. From the basement, a draft moved through the floorboards, brushing cold air across the living room carpet. Upstairs, JonBenet's room was neat and still. Her pageant trophies glimmered faintly on the shelf, catching the dim light from the hallway. A pink nightgown hung on the chair beside her bed untouched. Her name was stitched into it, neat and bright red thread. In the corner, a doll sat with glass eyes fixed toward the bed, its painted smile too wide, too knowing. The sound of the clock in the hallway grew louder, every tick slicing through the stillness. It was the only sound that dared to move. Downstairs, the house felt different. The warmth did not reach there. The air grew heavier, thicker, as if it refused to move. The basement door stood half open. A faint smell lingered, something metallic, faintly sweet, wrapped in cold. The string from a flashlight dangled near the steps, swaying slightly, though no one had passed. Each step down creaked under weight that was not there. The walls seemed to press closer, the shadows bending in unnatural shapes. A soft thud echoed from somewhere deeper, muffled but sharp enough to raise the hair on the back of a neck. Then, a light flickered, brief and weak, like a dying breath. It revealed the edge of a white blanket on the floor, small and perfectly folded. Beneath it, a shape, still. The sound of the wind outside vanished. Every part of the house seemed to hold its breath. And from somewhere far away, the faintest sound, a child's voice, echoing through the pipes, soft and tremulous, as if calling for help long after it was too late. The voice faded into the cold walls, swallowed by the air that refused to move. A single drop of water fell from the pipe above, landing with a hollow echo that cut through the silence. It sounded too loud, too sharp, like the house itself wanted to break the stillness but could not. A faint glimmer caught the dim light near the blanket. A golden bracelet, small and delicate. It was shaped like a heart. The clasp was broken, the metal twisted as if pulled by force. The flashlight on the floor flickered again. Its beam slid across the concrete and landed on the ransom note lying just a few feet away. 3 pages written in a careful, shaking hand. The words looked rehearsed. Too neat for panic, too controlled for mercy. The handwriting tilted slightly to the left, the ink pressed deep into the paper. Someone had written with purpose, every word carved with intention. In the corner, the furnace hummed softly, its low vibration mixing with the faint rattle of the window pane. The smell of dust and cold metal filled the air. The light trembled again, catching on a footprint, small, faint, smeared in a half circle, as if someone had turned suddenly. Upstairs, a phone began to ring. Its sound echoed through the empty hallways, bouncing off the walls, rising in intensity. The shrill tone broke the quiet like a scream. No one answered. The light in the basement went out completely. Darkness swallowed the space whole. But the sound of the furnace continued, steady, mechanical, almost rhythmic. And with each pulse, it felt like the heart of the house was still beating slowly, painfully, under the weight of what it held. Outside, the snow kept falling. Soft, endless. It buried the footprints on the porch, erased the marks on the driveway, silenced the world beyond those walls. Inside, the truth waited, still, cold, and alive only in the echo of that faint, unreachable voice. The echo drifted upward through the vents, whispering between rooms, brushing past the garland that still hung above the staircase. The ornaments shimmered faintly, reflecting slivers of blue from the police lights now flashing outside. They painted the house in pulses, red, blue, red, like the rhythm of a heartbeat struggling to stay alive. The front door burst open, the hinges groaning under the sudden weight of motion. Boots struck the polished floor. Heavy and hurried. The officers moved quickly, their breath visible in the cold air that had seeped inside. Basement, one voice said, steady but low. The sound of radios cracked through the tension, static mingling with the soft hum of the furnace below. The officers descended, flashlights slicing through the dark. Each beam trembled slightly with the hands that held it. The smell grew stronger now, stale air mixed with something sweet, metallic and wrong. Their steps slowed. The light caught the white blanket again, it did not move. The air thickened until even breathing felt intrusive. The lead officer knelt down, his gloved hand hesitating just above the edge of the fabric. He lifted it gently. The silence broke, not through sound but through the absence of it. The moment expanded, stretching through the room, through the walls, through the men who suddenly stood frozen. The sight before them was too still, too small. A pageant tiara, bent and cracked, glimmered faintly beside the body. Her blonde hair was tangled around it, strands clinging to the metal. Her face looked peaceful, almost asleep. But her eyes were half open, glassy, reflecting the light in a way that no living gaze ever could. One of the officers turned away, his throat tightening. Another whispered a quiet prayer. The sound of the furnace persisted, indifferent and steady. Its rhythm filled the silence left behind by the living. Upstairs, the Christmas lights still blinked, slow and gentle, casting tiny halos across the walls. Outside, snow covered everything. The world looked untouched, perfect. And inside that perfect house the truth hid behind ribbons, tinsel, and the memory of a little girl's last song. The house did not feel alive anymore. Every wall seemed to breathe out sorrow, every room heavy with something unseen yet deeply present. The glow of the Christmas lights flickered softly against the framed family photos lining the hallway. Smiling faces, laughter frozen in time. A mother holding her daughter in a glittering pageant dress. A father standing proudly beside them, a brother with a hesitant grin. Now the same house felt hollow. Each photograph watched in silence as officers moved carefully, speaking in whispers that barely reached the air. In the kitchen, the half-drunk glass of milk still sat on the counter. Beside it, a small bowl of pineapple, the spoon resting where a child's hand had once held it. The refrigerator hummed quietly, its sound thin and constant, a cruel imitation of normalcy. Detectives filled the living room, their notebooks trembling slightly in gloved hands. One of them stared at the ransom note spread across the table, his eyes narrowing. The handwriting was familiar, eerily so. Too practiced, too domestic. He glanced toward the stairs where the soft echo of a mother's cry drifted down. It was not a scream. It was the kind of sound that came from somewhere deep, where grief turned into disbelief. The father stood near the doorway, his face pale, his hands shaking as he gripped the frame. He stared at the note again, then toward the floor, as if the answers hid in the cracks of the wood. The detective spoke quietly. "There are no signs of forced entry," he said, his voice flat but cautious. Another officer shifted uncomfortably. Then who was she afraid of? Silence again. Only the faint ticking of the hallway clock answered. From the basement a camera flash burst once, then again. Each flash painted the walls white for an instant, then left them darker than before. Upstairs the little girl's room remained untouched. The tiara's ribbons and glittered sashes waited in perfect order, a shrine of innocence. On her pillow, the faint imprint of a small head still lingered in the fabric. It smelled of baby shampoo and something faintly floral, something that already felt like memory. Outside, the snow began to harden under the weight of the morning light. The street was still. The neighbors stood in their doorways, whispering, their faces pale in the cold. And in that quiet Colorado morning, beneath the perfect white snow, something darker settled. A silence that would never truly leave that house again. The morning unfolded with an unnatural stillness. The rising sun brushed the rooftops with a faint gold, but its warmth never reached the Ramsey house. It stood there, bright on the outside and hollow within, like a stage after the play has ended. Inside, the scent of coffee mixed with the sharp sting of latex gloves. Officers moved in slow, deliberate motions, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Every corner of the house felt like it was holding its breath, afraid to reveal what it knew. In the dining room, a detective examined the ransom note once more. He traced the letters with his eyes, not his hands. The words demanded money, but they spoke of something else, something personal. Each line carried a rhythm of familiarity, as if the writer had walked through this home many times before. Another officer entered, his boots dusted with snow. He whispered something, too low to be heard by anyone else. But the lead detective looked up sharply, his expression tightening. The conversation turned quiet again. Eyes met, questions formed, but none dared to be spoken aloud. Upstairs, the mother sat on the edge of her bed, wrapped in a robe that shimmered faintly in the light. Her hands shook as she clutched a small photograph. JonBenet in her white dress, a crown perched on golden curls, smiling wide. The mother's lips moved soundlessly, her tears falling one by one, leaving dark spots on the image. A soft knock came at the door. No words, only a pause, a long, heavy pause. Then the handle turned and a detective stepped in. He did not speak. He only looked at her, then at the picture she held, and lowered his eyes. Somewhere below, a camera clicked again. The flash seeped through the cracks of the door, stark and cold. The father paced the hallway, his steps uneven, his face drained of color. He stopped near the staircase, gripping the railing with both hands. Through the front window, he could see the line of reporters gathering outside, their lenses glinting in the winter light. Whispers rose around him, questions, theories, fragments of disbelief. But his mind heard only one sound. The ringing of the phone that morning, echoing in his memory, pulling him back to the moment he had called for help. That desperate voice, his own, now sounded like a stranger's. Outside the snow glittered under the sun, hiding every trace of the night before. No footprints, no struggle, no path leading away, only silence. A perfect, blinding white silence that held the secret tight, refusing to let it go. The silence outside began to feel louder than any sound within. The cameras clicked, their shutters slicing through the frozen air as news vans lined the street. The name of the little girl was already spreading, whispered from one reporter to another, carried away on the breath of the cold Colorado morning. Inside, the detectives gathered near the fireplace. Notes scattered across the mantel, crime scene photos stacked on the table, the ransom letter pinned beneath a glass cup to keep it from curling. Every detail was being examined. Every fingerprint, every smudge of ink. Yet, the more they searched, the less sense it made. The window in the basement was half open, but there was no snow on the ledge. The cobwebs remained unbroken. No prints, no signs of anyone entering or leaving. The lead detective stood still, eyes fixed on the note again. He did not move for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of something he did not want to believe. This wasn't written by a stranger. A chill ran through the room that had nothing to do with the cold. The younger officer beside him shifted uncomfortably, his breath fogging in the air. Then who? He asked quietly. The detective did not answer. He only turned his gaze toward the staircase. The sound of muffled crying still echoed faintly from above. Upstairs, the mother sat surrounded by friends and family, their whispers overlapping, words of comfort that did nothing to reach her. Her hands were clasped tightly, the knuckles white, her mind lost somewhere between guilt and disbelief. The father stood beside the window, staring out into the sea of flashing lights. He looked like a man waiting to wake from a nightmare. In the corner, the Christmas tree still glowed. Its ornaments caught the morning light, throwing soft reflections across the room. The angel on top leaned slightly to one side, its glass wings cracked. The gift boxes beneath it remained unopened, their ribbons untouched, their paper still perfectly folded. One of the officers walked past, stopping for a moment to glance at them. His eyes lingered on the smallest box, wrapped in silver paper, a tag that read, "To JonBenet with love." He swallowed hard and turned away. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second marking a heartbeat the house no longer had. Outside, the sound of cameras grew louder, the voices of reporters pressing closer, their words piercing through the windows like cold wind. And through it all, the house stood still, beautiful, quiet, untouched on the surface, yet inside, it held something far too dark for the daylight to reveal. The light shifted through the windows as the day stretched on, the snow outside glowing gold beneath the low sun. Inside, the air had grown dense, heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. Every corner of the Ramsey house seemed to carry an echo, a faint memory of laughter, of footsteps, of music that had once filled the rooms. Now, those echoes only deepened the quiet. Detectives moved carefully from room to room. Every door opened felt like peeling back a layer of something fragile, something sacred. The walls still smelled faintly of pine and perfume, traces of celebration that no longer belonged to joy. In JonBenet's room, a young officer paused beside the vanity table. The surface glittered with tiny bottles of nail polish, pink lipstick, a small comb with a few golden strands still caught between its teeth. He looked at them as if they might speak, as if they might explain how innocence could exist beside such darkness. He turned toward the bed. The pillows were fluffed neatly, untouched. The blanket had been folded earlier by another officer, who could not bear to leave it lying there. A stuffed bunny sat against the headboard, its fur worn thin from too many hugs. Its button eyes stared forward, unblinking, eternal witnesses to the silence that followed the storm. Downstairs, the father spoke with one of the detectives, his voice low, barely holding steady. He kept repeating the same thing. She was everything to us. Everything. Each word trembled as if the truth was a weight he could not lift anymore. The detective's eyes studied him, calm, careful, unreadable. There was sympathy in his gaze, but something else too, something colder, sharper, hidden behind duty. From the kitchen, a cup shattered against the tile. The sound broke the tension for an instant, scattering it like glass. A woman's voice gasped, followed by hurried footsteps and whispered apologies. The detective did not look up. He only sighed, his hand resting on the edge of the ransom note once more. The ink shimmered faintly under the light. 3 pages of lies and desperation. 3 pages that had already destroyed a home. Outside the crowd had grown, neighbors huddled in coats murmuring, their breath curling in the cold. The town that once felt safe now felt hollow, fragile, as if something inside it had cracked forever. Snow began to fall again, soft, deliberate flakes drifting through the air like ash. They gathered on the windowsill, silent and pure, while inside truth lingered in the stillness, waiting, not to be found, but to be uncovered, slowly, painfully, by those who dared to keep looking. Evening descended quietly over Boulder, wrapping the Ramsey home in a muted, sorrowful glow. The police cars were gone now, leaving behind faint tracks in the snow that the wind slowly erased. Only a single porch light remained on, its beam pale and trembling against the deepening blue of dusk. Inside, the house stood hollow. The warmth from the day had bled away, replaced by a stillness that felt almost reverent. The Christmas tree still shimmered softly in the corner, its ornaments swaying in the faint draft that slipped through the old windows. The angel on top no longer leaned, someone had straightened it before leaving, though no one remembered who. In the basement, yellow tape crossed the doorway like a scar. The cold air clung to the walls, holding on to the memory of every breath that had filled the room. A faint scent of wax and dust lingered where candles had burned earlier, a small act of mourning in a place too dark for comfort. Upstairs, JonBenet's room remained untouched. Her ribbons, her pageant dresses, her tiaras, all perfectly in place. The mirror reflected the faint light from the hallway, casting a ghostly shimmer across her trophies. Each one bore her name in gold letters, shining like a whisper of who she had been. The house creaked softly as the wind pressed against the walls, a low sound that almost resembled breathing. For a moment it felt as if the home itself wanted to speak, to release what it had seen, to confess what it held within its walls. But the truth stayed silent, buried not in the snow outside, nor in the dark corners below, but within the hearts of those who lived here. The father stood one last time by the front door. He looked back at the staircase, at the faint trace of light spilling from the child's room. His eyes lingered there, unblinking, until the wind slipped through the gap beneath the door and stirred the fallen pine needles near his feet. He stepped out slowly, closing the door behind him. The latch clicked. The sound was small, final, like the last note of a song that would never be sung again. Outside, the snow fell heavier now, soft and endless, blanketing the world in white. And as night swallowed the little house on 15th Street, it became just another quiet home in a quiet town, a place where the light still glowed, the decorations still sparkled, and the silence kept its secret forever.